Namaskar. Good evening, everybody. It's indeed a great moment for us today at the Bombay Management Association. And I have this unique honor and privilege to welcome in our midst someone who is very close to us at the Bombay Management Association, being our mentor and guide, since he's the president of the All India Management Association. Let us all welcome Sri Harshpati Singhania. Good evening, sir, and it's an honor that you are visiting us digitally today at the Bombay Management Association.
Thank you.
As most of us are aware, we begin the countdown to celebrate the National Management Day, which is on 21st of February this year. Being a Sunday, we are celebrating a couple of days before and trying to ensure that we have an intellectual feast as we progress and reach 21st of February. To set the ball rolling, we had requested Sri Harshpati Singhania to grace the occasion and declare the National Management Day celebrations of the Bombay Management Session open, and he was very kind enough to agree to be part of this event this evening. Mr. Singhania himself is a very accomplished and a well-revered industry professional. Currently, the Vice Chairman and Managing Director of JK Paper Limited, and also a director on several JK Group companies, has had the privilege of completing his MBA from Massachusetts, also has done courses from Harvard, a tremendous lean in the field of academics, training, and public policy, governance, opinion making when it comes to industry matters, has seen Mr. Harshpati Singhania on several boards and advisory committees at FICCI and several of the government advisory boards over a period of time. Currently, as I mentioned, he is the president of the All India Management Association and has taken IMA to a high in terms of the digital deliveries that one has experienced ever since the lockdown had begun. In fact, most of you will already have seen the communication we sent from IMA about the wonderful program they have planned on the 20th of February, where several stalwarts are going to speak to us on various aspects of managing enterprise and managing people in enterprises. Mr. Singhania also has deep interest in art, golf, and philanthropy. Today, when we decided that we would launch a series about some of the best brands that India has built, made in India or Atmanirbhar Bharat, as they say, one of the first names that came to mind was a 100-year legacy of the JK Group. And hence, we have Mr. Harshpati Singhania here to begin this innings of learn from the leaders, learn from the Indian super brands, the JK story. Welcome once again, sir, Sri Harshpati Singhania. Delighted to have you here, and it's our honor to have you in our midst. Namaskar, and welcome to Bombay Management Association.
There we go. Thank you, Professor Mani, for those very kind words. Indeed, it is my great, not just pleasure, but honor to be with you at the Bombay Management Association, which is one of the foremost management associations of our country. And I'm very happy and honored that you've asked me to come today. But before I say anything on the topic at hand, let me compliment you and your entire team, your leadership, all your members on the wonderful work that you are doing in the service of management for the nation, not just for people, but for the nation. IMA, as you rightly mentioned, one of the interesting things was that IMA was able to very quickly pivot to a digital platform. And that has kept IMA going. But what is even more heartening is that so many of the LMAs, the local management associations across the country, have been able to do it seemingly fairly smoothly and painlessly. I am not talking of the pain that goes behind the scenes for people who put it together, the staff, the leadership team. But really speaking, it has been a great thing. And if you ask me, IMA has been one of the more successful organizations in being able to pivot to this digital and now maybe even hybrid technology. So my compliments to you. You have a very impressive lineup of events coming in the next successive days, as well as overall. And I wish your association, the Bombay Management Association, the best in all its endeavors.
Thank you, sir.
So can I now start with the topic at hand and what we wanted to do today?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, great. Yeah, good. Put this on full screen. Is the screen visible? Abhi, it is not.
Yes, sir. It's clear and fine.
All right, sure. So what I thought I would do today is that I would, talk, as you said, about JK and JK organization and the brand behind it. But we'll also talk a little bit about the background and ethos and all of that. And then I'd be very happy to take the discussion forward in interaction and question and answer. So I put together some slides which will help us sort of focus on the issues, and then of course lots of that. So really, we say that more than 100 years of trust, and I'll come to why we say that. But essentially, when we, over a period, have been talking to different people and different discussions around what JK as a brand means to people, it could be to consumers, it could be to potential employees, it could be to a cross-section of people. Amongst a whole lot of descriptors, two things that come across. One is trust, and the other is reliability. So these two is what we see, and therefore I thought that we would put this here to say more than 100 years of trust. Now, before we get into the JK story, really, how does trust build a brand? Now, I put down some pointers here, and these are not by any means exhaustive or comprehensive, and everybody, particularly management associations and Professor Mani, a professor like you, might have many other things to say. But I just put down some things in terms of saying this whole thing of manufacturer, product, customer, and actually manufacturer should be now a service provider or a solution provider, not just a manufacturer. So we talk about reliance and dependability. We talk about authenticity of what the service or the product that is being offered. We talk about consistency. I think consistency is very important, and particularly for brands, for companies, for organizations that have stood the test of time, so as to say, and remain relevant. Consistency becomes a key factor. You can do something marvelous one day, and then after time fade out unless there is consistency. Satisfaction, delight doesn't require much explanation, and delivering on every promise is very important. That brings back consistency. That comes back to saying you actually walk the talk and do what you have said you will do with the stakeholder, with the customer. Adapting to emerging technology, so remaining contemporary. So all of these kinds of things, which we would say is an intangible sum of the attributes of the product or service, really goes towards building a brand. Now, trust is built by creating a lasting partnership. And we learn from the customer in that endeavor. And according to that, we keep on recreating, innovating, reinventing ourselves. And that is where the brand keeps on delivering despite the name of the brand remaining the same. Because this does not end here. This is a virtuous cycle where you get feedback, you move in, and again you rejig the whole thing. But that is what the consistency is in walking the talk, which delivers the value. Moving on, JK organization. So it was started by Lala Kamlapat Singhania, and who happened to be my great grandfather, and so he started the enterprise, but he used and from his father his name and his initials. So Jugilal was his father's name. So that is where it came from. JK, Jugilal Kamlapat. And in fact, the early companies had the full name. It had Jugilal Kamlapat so and so, whatever manufacturing company limited. So it started from there. And Lala Kamlapat Singhania, was somebody who was already in business. He was trading, he was in banking, and a whole lot of things. But fired up by Mahatma Gandhi's zeal for Swadeshi, he decided or got inspired, and he actually was trading in British cloth. And he decided to set fire to his entire merchandise, which was a very courageous or a bold act. And then he decided to set up an enterprise based on Indian capital, Indian labor, and using Indian technology. And thus, it started in 1921 with the establishment of the JK Cotton Spinning and Weaving Mills Limited in Kanpur. And that was the first sort of recognizable enterprise with the JK moniker or the JK brand name as such. And then several others followed. It followed with enterprises that came in later on. There was, JK cotton mills here, there was JK jute mills, there was JK oil mills, and so on and so forth, which came in. Today, the JK organization is amongst the top business groups. We have over there for 100 years. It's 1921. We are sitting here, and I'm speaking to you in 2021 precisely. So it's over 100 years of heritage. The philosophy has been to make in India, largely. It doesn't mean we are not engaged globally. I will tell you, we export to over 100 countries in the world. But the philosophy has been with this at heart. And the logo of JK, which we will talk about later, which is on the right-hand corner of the screen, is based on values of dignity of labor, of technological advantage, and trust. And JK has had a legacy of several firsts, that means products that it made for the first time in the country. This is today broadly where we are. I mean, these are some of the major brands or companies that we have. These I don't need to dwell on, but you would know entire cement, textiles, agri-businesses, a whole lot of other things. So that is really what comes out. Next. Now the group is today well diversified, and as this would show, we have a whole lot of businesses which are given here. I won't read them out for you. You can see them. But we have more than 500,000 shareholders. We employ over 40,000 people. We have a distribution network of over 10,000 retailers and distributors and all of this. But more importantly, I want to tell you that right from the inception, while there has been an entrepreneur or a founder or a promoter family, this is not a family business in that sense of the word. It has been there, but we have had professionals all across, right from inception, up to the top levels as chief executives, starting from management trainees. So the ethos of the organization is the entrepreneurial spirit of the founding family, but governed independently by professionals and very well qualified people. So when this started out, as I mentioned, with Lala Kamlapa Singhania initially, and then he died fairly young, but he was then supported, and then the legacy was built by his three sons. So Padampat Singhania, Lala Kailashpat Singhania, and Lala Lakshmipat Singhania. And they were all in Kanpur initially. And then they moved as the business grew. So initial enterprises were in Kanpur. Then, for example, we acquired Raymond Woolen Mills in Bombay. So one of my grandfathers moved to Bombay, Lala Kailashpat moved to Bombay. We started with other enterprises in the eastern region. Lala Lakshmipat moved to Calcutta. So like that, this whole whole thing spread. And so we were the first to produce a whole lot of lot of products for the first time in the country. So you will see there even before this, but 1944, for example, for the first to make aluminum from Indian bauxite, a whole lot of other things in excuse me, in paper, in fibers. In 1977, the first to produce steel belted radial tires in this country. The first to bring in white cement using dry process technology in 84, and so on and so forth. I won't read out everything for you, but it gives you a flavor as to how this has been a pioneering effort in many ways. Next. So this really brings in the JK brand story, because each of these, as you've seen chronologically, I've given you some examples, they built on the name JK. Each enterprise, each product, it's successively built. And as you will see in this, it's a map of India, of course, with showing the enterprises and locations. This is not exhaustive, so there may be some missing, but it shows the activities. And as I said, we do export to over 100 countries, and we have manufacturing units outside as well. So the brand actually is built as it grew, and having the JK name as a common thread. Now, if we look very loosely at the brand architecture, what is called the brand house? The brand house here simply means that a large number of our enterprises are named, have a common identity, and that common identity is JK. So, for example, you have JK Tire, you have JK Paper, you have JK Lakshmi Cement, you have JK Cement, which is another company, and you have JK Finner, and so on and so forth. So they bring in a common identity, and therefore customers or people at large, when they see this name, they are reassured of trust, of reliability, of quality, of all of these attributes. And therefore they say that instead of buying some other cement, let's buy this cement, because they also, by the way, make tires, and we know we are familiar with their tires, or we're familiar with some other products of theirs. So that's how this worked, with a common identity. Also, when I say house of brands, the second part, there are some companies which do not have the name JK and they're part of their brand. But many of their products, if they are, let us say, significant enough, are widely distributed enough, carry the name JK. So let's take a company like Umang Dairy. So it's not called JK Dairy, it's called Umang Dairy. But the products it has, and they are all independent brand names, because like in an FMCG company, it has independent brands. But the packing would have a common logo on top saying JK Dairy or JK Foods and things like that. So that is there. But allow me to explain one or two other interesting aspects which a lot of people won't know about. The logo itself. This logo was made decades ago. And this is not just showing JK, but if you see the circle or the wheel, if I will say, this actually has 24 teeth, which denotes constant activity of 24 hours in a day. That means enterprise must keep moving and we must keep working. It has the wheel, which is the wheel of enterprise. It has the left hand vertical is really a symbolic hand holding a hammer or a machine tool, which says that it has labor and the dignity of labor, and that enterprise must happen with your own hands and with your own efforts. So in a way, it is the self. It is what we are today calling, if I may say, Atmanirbhar. So this is an interesting thing of how this evolved, and therefore this has become a common identity. And it inspires us and reminds us in terms of saying how we really, these are the values, this is of the founders, this is the ethos in which we will run the business. And this has helped us and paid us dividends. So leveraging brands, I did talk about it in terms of saying continuous thrust on products, quality. JK Tire, first to bring in radials in the country. JK Paper, first to make surface-sized papers in the country. JK Lakshmi Cement doing similar. So you have a common name here with the JK. On brands as well, the lineage. You take products like JK Copier or JKLC, that means JK Lakshmi Cement Pro Plus or Pro Cement, JK Dairy Top, JK Pioneer Oil Seals, JK Jet Steel series of tires. So in the sub brands, also in many cases, the JK name comes in. Also, this is reinforced through mass communication as per the requirement of the business and in also in corporate communications and so on, as highlighted in product packaging. So this keeps the brand contemporary, this keeps it modernized. Now, what I will do here is the next couple of slides, I will, 3 slides in fact, take an example. So JK Tire is example and how we try to build on this. So really speaking, the company is well known. We started, as I said, with the first radial, steel belted radial introduction. Today we have multiple plants. We have 9 plants in India and I think 4 plants abroad. So we have many plants. We are making the largest range of tires. We have made largest off-road tires, etc., and so on. But the point here, and we have now recently, 2 years ago, the first to bring in smart tires. But the point here I wanted to show you is JK Tire actually associated with motorsports many decades ago, almost from its inception. Now, what is the connection? The connection is that if a tire is good for demanding requirements of motorsports, it is safe and good for you. And this has been a consistent theme over the last 3 decades, or in fact 4 decades, since JK Tire has got involved with motorsports. They were very nascent in India when we started. There was hardly anybody promoting motorsports. Now it has become a big thing, or it's become a much bigger thing. But it brought in this thinking that if it is good, it is good for you as well, if it is reliable and can take those conditions. And the consistency of this branding. So it is not that we did it for a few years and left it. It has been happening for all these decades continuously. And indeed, many people coming out of motorsports and JK Tire actually went on to become globally recognized Indian names in this field. The other thing is that the tagline, for example, of JK Tire, which says total control, is also associated with total control means reliability and trust. So this is an example of how consistency of this communication helps us. So it's not just products. Products keep changing, but this is what happens. Next. Take JK paper. Now, while we had, we were the first to bring in surface size papers. So actually, we coined the name JK Maplitho, meaning the surface size paper Maplitho. Now, Maplitho later on became, this was in the 60s, early 60s. Maplitho actually went on to become synonymous with the category of paper. And you had tenders saying Maplitho paper. Even today, many of you will say, for printing paper, high quality, we want Maplitho paper. Now, others also make it, but that is the name that we sort of coined. And it is JK Maplitho, for example, then. Later on, we found in the 90s, with the advent of office machines and copiers and other printing machines, that what were people doing? People were buying large sheets of paper, cutting it in smaller packs and running it through a machine. We said, hey, why can't we give the customer an assurance to say that you will get something, if it is mill packed or pre-packaged, it is something which has a good quality paper because it says JK, it is from JK. If it says 500 sheets, there are actually 500 sheets rather than buying it in a brown wrapper at a stationery shop where you're never going to count whether it has 500 sheets. And you don't know which company's paper is in there. So like that, we came up with this. And we became the first people to mass market and brand this product. I would not say we were necessarily the first to manufacture copier paper in the country. We were one of the early ones, obviously. But we became the first one to mass market and brand it. And today, JK Copier has again, with the hard work put in by people, become synonymous with copier papers. And then we looked at the market. And with that, this is the red one that you see here on your screen. With that, we found that there were other market segments that people wanted. There were papers which were of a lower grammage that people wanted. They wanted it at different price points. They wanted it for slightly differing applications. So we started coming out with a whole range of office papers. So you have JK Easy Copier, you have JK Max, you have JK Sparkle, you have JK Cedar for digital printing, and so on and so forth. So the point I wanted to say here is that, again, you have a brand which is core, but you are looking at extensions, you are looking at opportunities. But again, it's the whole feedback loop of understanding what the customer wants and then going back and doing this. Now, further, how do we build further association? So, for example, uh, about a couple of years ago, we started an author award rather, I should say, which is an award for Indian writers, Indian female writers, women writers, only in different categories. Again, bringing in a connect with paper and literary pursuits and writing. So this is how we are connecting over a period of time. All of this happening over decades. Let me give you one more example of Lakshmi Cement. Now, when we started this, the company brand was really Lakshmi Cement. It was not JK Lakshmi Cement. It did very well. It had a footprint, and we were selling from our Rajasthan plant, so we were largely catering to the northern market and the western market coming into Gujarat. And we did well. But as we started expanding our footprint, we felt, how do we unify this even more? So we added the prefix JK and made it JK Lakshmi Cement. And that really solidified its connection of Lakshmi Cement with the JK organization, with the other companies. So when it was Lakshmi Cement on itself, it was a well-known cement brand. But was it seen as the same breadth and connecting to say it is coming from the same house of JKs as some of the other products are? So by adding the prefix JK here, JK Lakshmi Cement reinforced itself. Then we looked at other products. So you have various other products. So for example, from JK Lakshmi Cement, like JK Lakshmi, the green bag, you had JK Lakshmi Pro Plus Cement, which came out to be a premium cement in certain markets. And looking at the flavor of further branding, because now we've expanded our footprint to other markets, Central India, East India, North, West. So really, it's a much bigger footprint. And therefore, we brought in other products. We brought in, things like gypsum, plaster. We brought in other products that go into building materials. So you see this JK Smart Bond and so on and so forth, but all carrying the JK name and having a similar a tie-in with the same brand. And given that cricket has been the flavor of the recent years, again, we brought in another brand called JKLC Sixer, which was yet another brand catering to certain segments of the market. And to reinforce this, JK Lakshmi today is a sponsor of certain IPL teams, and it has branding over there. So that again brings us, because as we are going more national, this is something which is visible on a much larger audience, and therefore you can see JK Lakshmi. It wouldn't have made sense to be an IPL sponsor if we were only confined to, let us say, the northern market, for example. But as we've gone pan-India, this starts making sense and you reinforce the branding. Another story, which is of Fenner. Interestingly, Fenner was a British company, and we first entered it through a joint venture. So we bought into a part of the company and became a joint venture company. And we remained with that, like that, for a very long time till we bought them out and acquired the entire company. Now, Fenner by itself was a household brand as far as automotive products, for example, belts and oil seals and a whole lot of things were concerned. So very, very popular and a very powerful brand, having the largest market share, which it still does. Now, everybody knew this. So our issue was, should we tinker with this? It sells very well by itself because it's a very old company having great heritage. We didn't do anything. It was only much later on that we said, how do we, but people still would not, they would associate Fenner as a great company for great products, but they would obviously not associate it as much with the name JK, even though we had the JK logo on the pack. So we then rechristened this whole thing to be called JK Fenner India Limited. And that solidifies, again, the JK. Now, so therefore, the more number of products, the more areas that we touch on with the JK name, the more it feeds into itself. More and more people and stakeholders become familiar with this name, and it goes back into feeding into the trust, the reliability, the quality parameters. So this is another interesting story. You had something very popular, but by adding JK later on, we were able to do this. So this is another example. I don't want to talk too much. JK seeds and agri business, agri seeds business, hybrid seeds business. But if you look at the pack, it has JK so and so, JK so and so in terms of the various seeds and the brands they have. They have local brand, but it starts with JK, again reinforcing the quality to the rural markets, to the farmer. And by the way, the farmer is familiar with this also because of the JK tractor tires, for example, the farm tires, or the belts that he's buying to run his pump in the field with the JK Fenner belt. So these are all examples, and maybe he's building his house using JK cement or JK Lakshmi cement, and that is how that name feeds into each other. Then is our, for example, our dairy business. So as I said, the company is called Umang Dairies, but if you look at the pack branding, I'm sorry, this is a bit small, you will find JK Dairy or JK Foods written. We made an acquisition a couple of years ago of the snack food company called Fun Flips. This also will have, while the brand is predominant here because it's a really strong brand, but at the back, it will say JK Foods. So there is a reinforcement, and this evolves also with different stages of the product, of the brand, of evolution of the company. Now, that having said so, coming back to going beyond business, like any other responsible group in India, we've always wanted to give back to society, and this has happened from day one, from the early days. So in the 30s, 40s, several hospitals, higher education institutions were built across the country in different parts. Now, this is an example here when we set up a university more recently, this is only 8-10 years ago in Jaipur, called JK Lakshmipat University. So while Lakshmipat goes to one of the founders, but JK brings in the reinforcement of saying it is coming from a reliable and trusted background, and therefore this is good. So this part, PSRI hospital, of course, is so all of these are philanthropic. These are not for profit ventures, but they are there that they should be able to generate enough to be able to grow. Similarly, we have PSRI hospital here, and you have many other such enterprises across the country. This is a leadership award that was instituted many years ago and giving back to society again. And this was inspired under the leadership of my late uncle, who was the head of the JK organization, the president, Sri Harishankar Singhania. And he served on the board of governors of IIM Lucknow for more than 15 years. And he got the idea to say, why don't we promote management and leadership in the country? And therefore, we decided that we would sponsor this, and we do this. And I have one other slide left, which is giving back to society. I've talked about some of this, but the point I want to convey with this slide is this. What you say, what is it to give back to society to do with the brand? I say that these are programs which are given here, which is, for example, adult literacy, or teaching people tailoring, or farmer trainings, or clubs of dairy farmers, or ice cleaning camps. They are all being done under the aegis and banner of the local enterprise in that area, where our factories are, where our centers are. And therefore, the people coming there know this is being done under the aegis of, say, a JK Tire or a JK Lakshmi Cement, or whichever company there is. And therefore, there is a community and society connect with JK. So while there is genuine good being done, the purpose is not to bring the JK name. The purpose is to help the people of the country, to do good and do community development. So all that is there. That is the prime purpose, and that is how it is. But the feedback loop here again is that you get the benefit of having all of these people exposed to the JK name, and they at one point in time or the other are your customers. So there is a lot of stuff, and therefore this reinforces JK names to society. So there is a lot of things, and there were many other things which, I mean, time would not permit me to say, but I hope I have been able to, in some way, bring to you how this has been built, how over the years, over 100 years, brick by brick, step by step, how the brand reinforces into each other, into itself, and reinforces the enterprise, which gives you advantages of customer familiarity, of trust, of reliability. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Mani. I'll be happy to, we can stop the screen sharing now, and I'll be happy to take on questions or clarifications if anybody has. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. That was indeed inspirational. It really set the tone for a wonderful sharing on what Atmanirbhar Bharat is all about. And maybe all this started about 50 years ago, as you had already explained during your presentation. We really appreciate the straight from the heart sharing, and we've learned a lot of valuable lessons today. I can vouch for that on behalf of the participants. As we often do, we will allow some of the participants to unmute and reach across to you to share an experience or ask a question. And I shall also request you to take a few questions, which I shall pose from the chat box that the audience have asked. So let's begin with this first question. When you build a large group like JK, where you spoke about the trust, the values, etc., how does one ensure that the culture and the fabric of culture pervades uniformly across all the business units?
So, Professor Mani, you want me to answer each question separately, or do you want to take two or three which are similar, and then we can sort of perhaps cover it in whichever way you like? I'm okay.
So I have already combined some of the questions, so we'll take one at a time, so it will be easier for you also.
So, all right, this is a great question, and this is always an issue and a challenge. There is no one answer to it, but the thing is that you create your own ethos of working, of your management style, and over a period, people who are working with you understand some things that are unique to your organization, which becomes the culture. So, for example, I talked of trust, I talked of values. So some of the core values of our group are caring for people, for example. Another core value is integrity, including intellectual honesty. So we're not talking financial issues alone. So like that, there are a set of core values. There is hard work. So there are these values which are there. Now, this is given, explained, given to every employee who joins the company, that these are the core values. This is what we stand for. The company, each company is an individual enterprise which will have its own vision, mission, and all that. So I'm not mixing that with this. I'm talking of the core ethos of the group. And more importantly, I would believe, like in any organization, a lot of this is reinforced or actually brought home by behavior. So if you say that we are really valuing our human resources, our people, by looking at their interests, then you are reinforcing that message, and that builds the culture. This is an example. So culture building is a multi-pronged thing, from HR programs to the way you deal with your people. If people see a culture of what should I say, bossism, that's what prevails. You may say what you like. If people see a culture where seniors are rough with their juniors, that will be the culture. You can give a message the way you want if somebody is not performed, but it doesn't have to get into, I told you so kind of a story. So culture is based on all of this and is what we see across.
Absolutely, sir. And I'm glad that there was so much emphasis on the way HR plays an enabling role in maintaining the culture in the organization is something which came across very strongly. I'm handing over to Dr. Pramod Solanki, who incidentally is, of course, an HR specialist, doyen in the human resources field, ex Larsen and Tubro, TCS, and now into teaching, training, and consultancy. Welcome, Pramod, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Mani, for all those kind words. Sir, good evening to you, and thank you so much for this masterclass on how to build super brands. Hearing it from someone who has done it and continues to do it is really very reassuring. What I want to share is a quick, experience that kind of reinforces something that you said early on, that JK Group is a professional family organization, professional family business. I used to be a young lecturer in Jamnalal Bajaj Institute in 91, 92, and we did some assignment for JK Synthetics with our director, at Kota. So while that assignment lasted 2-3 months, 4 months, but during that time, our director shared something very interesting. He said in late 60s and early 70s, senior Mr. Singhania just came up to the then director, Dr. K.S. Basu, and he said, we want you people to look at our management practices, processes, and HR and see where we can, do a better job. So, and he used to wonder, today it's very fashionable. Every organization wants to engage a business institute to do something. But way back in 60s, for head of a business to walk up to a B school and say that, you please look at our management processes. I thought, that's a kind of pioneering thinking that reinforces what you said, that it's a professional family-run organization. And I just felt happy to share that with you. And that's why I thought I'll take this time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Solanki. But let me just share one other, let me elaborate what you said in a way.
Okay.
So let me do it at two levels. One is, of course, the fact that Dr. K.S. Basu was very closely associated with us. He used to do a lot of our training. And later on, in fact, near Bombay and Powai, we established a full-fledged training center at one point in time. And he was running programs across the country for our people, across different levels, senior most. So we have a top management program in which the chairman downwards participates. So it is not for, if I may, I hate to say it, for employees. The promoter is also an employee.
Sure.
After all, he or she also gets salary from the company. And they participate from, which is a tradition, by the way, which still continues. We do a biannual, once in 2 years, a top management conference. No longer Dr. Basu, of course, but all kinds of people. But Dr. Basu was the pioneer in doing this. This is number one. And I know that you're going to have your first K.S. Basu Memorial Lecture, Professor Mani, which I think Mr. Ajay Piram is doing. And it's great to have that association. But learning across the organization has been happening. And I will narrate to you now personally. You see, in my grandfather's generation, they worked very hard. I don't know whether they went to college. My father's generation went to college. But when I was growing up, I was told very clearly by my elders, that look, you may be from the family, which has founded and promoted businesses. But you've got to be professionally qualified because you're going to be dealing with qualified people. And you should be there not by virtue of your last name, but you should be there because of your competence. And therefore, I went to the US and did an MBA. Now, this has nothing to do about me, but the point I'm trying to convey is that we have viewed the professionalism very seriously because we believe that it is these people who really earn us our bread. And I will leave it at that.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So the next question pertains to brand resilience. JK is a brand which has obviously stood the test of time and is still regarded as a most respected brand. In difficult times that India goes through time and again, and I think this question is more pertaining to the current scenario also, how do we ensure that brands are resilient to whatever changes happen around us?
So, first of all, the fact that if you have a brand which is well recognized, which is trusted, itself gives it an ability to bounce back faster in difficult times. Because people would hopefully want to choose your products and services in preference to somebody else. Because there is already a built-up expectation of quality, of values with that brand. Having said that, I made a mention of this in my talk as well. That while the name is the same, a brand has to continue to reinvent itself. So, for example, the JK copier paper we first came out in the 90s is not the same JK copier paper that is being sold today. So one goes back to saying improving on product performance, on service, on technology. So how do you improve? So for example, the first tire that would have come out, the first truck tire in the 70s from JK Tire, and today's tire is very different. And argumentatively, the same would be for the fabric that Raymond produces today versus what they did 30 years ago. So you have to keep on reinventing. You have to keep on understanding customers' needs. You have to see that you are solving an issue or offering a customer what they want to serve their needs. And then you sort of tailor the product. See, in the early days, we all did, it was factory, you made it, and then somebody has to sell it. Now it is the other way around. We really need to see what is it that the market wants, what are the services that people want, and more importantly than products and services is the word today, customer experience. What is the experience the customer is wanting? And then you go back and re-architect yourself to say how you can best fulfill this for her or him. So really, resilience means you have to keep coming back with newer propositions, not just brand extensions by name, but by really value, performance, by really offering something which is different. So that is how it comes back. Take the example of the service industry, which has been most badly hit. Now you go to hotels, you could no longer go to hotels. You could no longer get that meal. So what did they start doing? They started putting together curated home delivery meals. May not be as good as the exact experience, but pretty close to it. And frankly, with the convenience of sitting in your own drawing room or in your own room in front of the TV and you're having the same food that you would have gone to a restaurant for. They started doing that. They started doing online payments, touchless delivery. Now, this is all not there, but at the end of the day, it was the experience you wanted. And these were enablers. The other way, the traditional way would have been, हम क्या करें? Government lockout कर दिया है. मेरा restaurant बंद है. We will only open when the lockout lifts. Can't do that. So this is also a story of resilience. And you're keeping the same brand the same restaurant, the same hotel doing this.
Absolutely. I now hand over to Mr. Ernest Fernandez. Mr. Fernandez has been a past president of our Bombay Management Association, has had a long career with the Tata Group. And Mr. Fernandez, over to you, please.
Oh, thank you. I was only wondering whether in managing the JK brand, it is straddling both industrial products and consumer products, which is rather complex to manage, but also in terms of the pricing. That means, is JK brand known more in the premier segment or in the economy segment? How do you manage the pricing policy in relation to the brand?
Mr. Fernandez, yes, it is complex because you have industrial products, you have consumer products, and you being from Tata's would know the challenges very well. See, pricing is really a function of where that company is in what it wants to offer. So there are some products that we do which are value for money. And then there are products that we do which are premium pricing. So again, I go back to something different. Let's take a company like Raymond, since we are talking to Bombay Management Association, although Raymond is pan-India. It does some of the most expensive textiles, and it also makes, blended textiles for the masses. So it really depends on, and there you start playing with sub-brands. Take another product. I'll give you a story in terms of our dairy business. It's interesting. Milk powder was sold in places which were deficient in liquid milk. So let's say East India, for example, was this. So we found that people at shops were, you went in Calcutta, for example, and said, I want milk powder. And it was literally sold in a paper packet or in a polyester pouch. And you bought it by money. So you say, I want 5 rupees worth of milk powder. I want 10 rupees worth of milk powder. And that was taken back home in an unbranded packet in a newspaper, or in that kind of a packet. And the shopkeeper said, this is from such and such company, and I'm giving you 10 grams. Now you really don't know what it was. So we said, okay, this is a mass market product. So we said, okay, what would happen if we put a brand and a wrapper around it? And we introduced a product called JK Dairy Top. It was initially called Dairy Top, and we added the JK moniker and said that we'll add JK Dairy Top. So what Dairy Top was, it was a 10 rupee pack pouch, and we made it in a sachet in the Luddy form, as you see all the shampoos and other stuff coming in. So it could be hung in the shop, and there was visibility. But what did the customer get? The customer got to say, if it says JK, it is made from the JK's dairy company. If it says it is so many grams, it is actually indeed so many grams. It's 100 grams, whatever it was. It is indeed so many grams. So there was this trust and assurance playing back, and that was a, sort of a mass market product. But if you looked at a premium product, which was Umang ghee, made by the same company, ghee is the most expensive cooking medium of the lot. It was priced accordingly. So really, it depends on the products, the services, and your desire to say which segment of the market you wish to serve. So it's not uniform.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the next question pertains to, when we are talking about culture, which you had already explained so well, how do you manage cultural differences in such a large country like India? And does it impact the interpersonal relationships at the workplace?
That's a very good question. The simple answer is, obviously, it impacts, India is not one. I mean, we share the same national ethos, but it's not one country in that sense, not in a political sense, but in terms of. So really speaking, most of you are experienced business people, and you know that a product that may be very popular in the southern part of India may not be that interesting for people in the eastern part of India, because there are local tastes, there are local preferences. I'll give you an interesting example. You know, paper, you would say paper is paper is paper. But we used to find that even white, so-called white paper with a slightly pinkish tint was preferred and demanded by printers in the southern part of India, while in the northern part, they wanted a slightly bluish tint. At the end of the day, both were white papers. Now we're not talking of colored papers. So these are preferences that sort of set in over a period because of the culture, the way we live, what is popular. Like in South India, you go, you see, animals, the horns of bullocks and bullock carts being painted. Maybe in some Maharashtra too, the Dharwad region. You don't see that in North India. You see very brightly colored buses and trucks in the southern part of India. You don't see that in Eastern India, for example. And there are some typical colors. So you have to keep all of that in mind when you're looking at products, brands, as well as in terms of the workplace. One has to be very sensitive to the cultural sensibilities, if I will, of that workplace, how people behave. And people indeed who even though they are transferred in a company, at least in managerial positions from one place to the other, have to be sensitive to that. And there is a culture in the workplace. So there's no doubt that there are cultural differences, and you have to manage them being sensitive to those.
All right, sir. I think that was a very, very profound response. We respect your time, sir. There are lots of questions, but I'm going to kind of move to the last two concluding questions of this session so that we do not take too much of your time as against promise to you. May I request Indrapalji to go ahead with his observation and questions. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, sir, wonderful narration of how JK Group has built its businesses over the years. And that's, I think, we should be all proud of. 100 years old company doing so well, so much professionally. My question is that now going forward with the kind of policies that have been adopted in our country, we are large multinational with deep pockets are taking over various companies in different sectors, creating huge and very powerful competition for Indian companies to compete with. In a way, there is no real level playing field. So going forward, do you see that highly diversified groups such as yours would be able to withstand this onslaught of competition? Or we require some policy interventions to let Indian companies prosper and grow?
So, okay, there are two or three parts of your question. See, the basic point is that policy interventions will happen only when they are required. When there is an unfair playing field, as in there's dumping, there are a whole lot of other things that happen. Policy interventions are definitely required. But apart from that, when it is not so, I think your larger question is how do Indian companies or corporates stand on their own vis-a-vis MNCs, which have very deep pockets. So let me say two quick things. One is the fact that JK organization or the JK Group was born out of this. The legacy was the time when we started was British India. Indian enterprise was not something which was easily possible. And in fact, the British people at that point made it difficult for you, because at the end of the day, they wanted raw materials from here. They wanted you to be agents and so on. So enterprise was not easy. And as you know, it's not a matter of JK, but all the old business groups which have been there or which started there, if you think about it, it's been a real struggle for the pioneers and the original founders of those groups. And many of you people from the association would have been the Bombay Management Association, would know that story better, because many of you would be associated with some of those groups. So the first point is, it is indeed possible. If it was possible then, it is indeed possible now. Second is that, you, depending on the strength of the company, depending on the strategy, you have to find your own place. So in all our businesses, we try to see that we are amongst the leaders. And in many cases, we are indeed market leaders. And if you don't look at the market only as a pan-India, but if you look at the market on chosen geographies and chosen places that you want to play, you become leaders there, you become regional leaders. So we look at all of that to understand and say, you know, each company says, so there are ways. The other way, an alternate way, I would say another way, an alternate way is to also see which segment you want to compete in. While the MNCs have great deep pockets, we Indian companies have a much better, and I would say a innate understanding of our Indian, habits. So let's take the previous question when we talked in terms of, what are the cultural differences, what are the issues here. We understand this much more. When an MNC comes in, it takes them longer to discover some of this. We can take some decisions which are faster here compared to an MNC, which has to ultimately it is reporting into somebody in Singapore or Hong Kong who reports to somebody in the UK or in the US. So while they are great, there are also issues around speed. I'm not saying this is wrong. They bring in systems, they bring in deep pockets, but so everybody can play to their advantages. And I think that can clearly happen. We have seen companies in India which have started small and have now become very successful household names in the country as well. So there are many, many examples, but yes, you have to work hard at it. There is no easy solution. And one will have to find one's own strategy in saying how you're going to navigate the river. I don't know if it answers your question, but at least that's my thought.
Right, sir. Thank you so much. And indeed, it was such an inspirational session. And I must venture to say that with Pati Singhania ji at the helm of affairs in JK and also at the All India Management Association, this wonderful learning journey will continue both for us and for all managers and professionals and academicians across the country. Thank you so much, sir, for gracing the occasion. It's an honor to have you here with us from IMA as well as from the JK Group. To wrap up this session and make the few concluding remarks, to say it in lighter vein, IMA has Pati Singhania ji and BMA has Anant Singhania ji. So I'm going to request Anant to please do the wrap up and also propose the vote of thanks on all our behalf. Over to you, Anant.
Thank you so much, Professor Mani. It's my pleasure and privilege to give this vote of thanks. I've always, I'm based in Mumbai for the rest of the speakers. Hajbhai is based in Delhi. We interact often enough, and I've always cherished his, his way of working whenever we work together. And I must compliment him for, taking out this time to be with us at the Bombay Management Association. Hajbhai, as you know, I have been the past president of BMA. So it's a really
proud of that. Very proud of that.
And not to say otherwise, but BMA was actually instrumental to form IMA initially with some of the funds that the other LMAs put together. So, but as you rightly said, the JK story, leading from the front. So IMA now, of course, is all-encompassing, All India Management Association. It has taken the seat that, some LMAs and some people put in and made it much bigger, much brighter. And of course, we've seen the wonderful work you've done in other associations. So I'm certain that that legacy of, your work, the way you dedicate, an honorary role to the All India Management Association will prevail. I must state that, when you were talking about, the legacy that we've all come to, to inherit and to build upon, I was wondering, but I learned a couple of snippets from you, which I was not aware of, It was very, very interesting. So I must thank you for being with us today at the Bombay Management Association and for kicking off the Management Week, which is an annual event. Of course, it's the first time that it's happening online, but it could never have been better than to have you be with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Anand.
Thanks,
And I'm
Anand. And
particularly pleased that to hear you and proud as well.
thank you, Anand. And you're right. For whatever it is worth to state, I had the unique privilege of taking over as president digitally. So I think everything we have done this year has been digital. And I hope that we can continue this digital and blended journey of learning as we progress in time to come. May I request Harshpati Singhania ji to just stay on with us for 2 more minutes. We have our group photograph, which we take as a memory of the times that we spent with you this evening in a digital format. May I request everyone to put on their videos, get your 1 minute time to get ready if you need to for the group photograph, and then our secretariat will do the honors. I want to particularly thank all our past presidents who've been here this evening, right from Anand to Indrapalji to Ernest Fernandez. I'd like to also acknowledge the presence of a former IMA president, Sri Krishan Kalraji. Thank you so much, sir, for finding the time to be here with us this evening. It's a blessing that you're here with us to be part of this IMA National Management Day and Management Week celebrations. Kindly be patient, everybody. As we always say, there's a lot of digital patience required in today's world. We had a total of 96 participants for this session, and we are still there with about 70 of them. We are across 4 screens. So please give our secretariat, Lakshmi and Supriya, the time to please cover all of us. Keep smiling while I am happy to share with you that tomorrow, in the second learning session of this series, we have yet another Indian super brand, ThyroCare, and Dr. Velumani will be talking to us on how ThyroCare became what it is today. As most of us are aware, and I'm so glad that Harshpati Singhania ji mentioned about this, we are launching our second event along with the KS Basu Memorial Trust on Friday. That is the BMA Ethics Conclave, where we have speakers from all over the world. And one of our former presidents, Sri Mahendra Chavan, is leading the effort, along with Sri Shailesh Haribhakti. Both of them have collected a wonderful panel of speakers, including Mukundan from Tata Chemicals and Sri Keki Mistry from HDFC. That happens on Friday. And Saturday, of course, we are launching for the first time ever the BMA Dr. K.S. Basu Memorial Leadership Lecture Series with Mr. Ajay Peramal. So do join us for this learning journey. I know I'm infringing on your evenings for the next 4 days, but I assure you it's going to be a wonderful learning experience. My colleagues in the Secretariat confirm that they have captured all your smiles. Thank you very much for being here with us this evening. Thank you, Harshpati Singhania ji. It's been a blessing to have us with your presence this evening. Namaskar. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you indeed. Great honor and pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Anand.
Likewise, Bhaiya. We'll catch up with you soon.
Yeah, we'll do. Bye. Thank you, Professor Mani. Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.